Alrighty, I think we're gonna get started here. Thanks for everyone for showing up, guests and panelists alike. So, welcome to our Careers and Conversations panel series hosted by Microbiome Center's Consortium Education Working Group. My name is Derek Camp. Joining me on tech is Kim Dudovu and Katrina DeWitt. The MCC is a nationwide network of microbiome centers working together to develop and share tools and resources that accelerate the understanding of all microbiomes. Part of this mission includes preparing early career scientists who are pursuing careers in microbiome research. And with these panel discussions, we hope to have the space where folks who are more established in their careers can offer insights, knowledge, and encouragement to those of us beginning to carve our paths in microbiome sciences. Today's panel is called Pathways in Higher Education. Our conversation today is going to be focusing on microbiology careers in the teaching sphere. We have educators representing both primarily undergraduate institutions and large state universities, and we're looking forward to hearing about their experiences and thoughts on what brought them into these fields and what insights they've made along the way. To start off, we'll have our panelists introduce ourselves. We'll go through the panel, and if folks want to give their name, their position title, and a brief background about their path to where they got today, and a synopsis maybe on what your research is and what your responsibilities are in your career and roles. And so to kick us off, I'll have Dr. Andrea Suria introduce.
Thank you, Derek. So, my name is Dr. Andrea Suria, and I'm an assistant professor at Ohio Wesleyan University. We're a small liberal arts college about 30 minutes north of Delaware, or of Columbus. We're in Delaware, Ohio. So, my position is 60% teaching, 30% research, 10% service. So, I do get to do a lot of research with students. So, we are undergraduate only. Um, I teach classes in microbiology and genetics. My PhD was in molecular and cell biology with a concentration in microbiology from the University of Connecticut. After that, I did a postdoc at UNC Chapel Hill, which was no longer a program there, but it was the NIH IRACTA program, which is both teaching and research. So that really set me up well for my position here. I was in my postdoc for 4 years, and then I've been here for 3 years. My research is in the Hawaiian bobtail squid defensive symbioses. So I look at how bacteria compete with potential pathogens and what antimicrobials they might make to prevent pathogens from infecting the squid eggs. I think you're muted, Derek, if you were.
Thanks, Andrea. Dr. Joe Holley, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's nice to have a conversation about undergraduate education. I'm at the University of Texas. I'm an associate professor of practice. So the University of Texas serves about 50,000 undergraduates, and I'm part of the College of Natural Sciences. I'm part of a program called the Freshman Research Initiative, and we seek to create smaller, novel, authentic research experiences for undergraduates. So we do try and emulate a smaller liberal arts college in our program. The Freshman Research Initiative gets students involved in research from their freshman year. It serves about 1,200 students each year, and there are 37 current undergraduate research labs. And I run one of those. It's called the Bugs and Bugs. As an associate professor of practice, my job is to teach students how to do research and practice research with them. So we do aim to do novel, authentic research experiences from the get-go throughout the student's undergraduate career. Um, all of the undergraduate research labs have a PI associated with them, and ours is Nancy Moran. And so my background, I have a PhD in entomology. I've worked on social insects much of my life, ants mostly. And then when I joined UT, I started working on honey, bees and wasps, and we try and describe the bacterial communities associated with bees and wasps, but also other insects. There are so many insects out there. We know very little about their bacterial associates. And so that creates a really accessible opportunity for undergraduates to discover new things. And so our primary research is designed to fit in with the Moran Lab research, but be perhaps a bit more risky. And we study honey wasps and carpenter bees and then other wasps as well. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And then Dr. Jennifer Oberle.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name's Dr. Jennifer Oberle. I am an associate teaching professor at Rutgers University. I'm on one of our three campuses. I'm on the Camden campus. We actually have our main campus in New Brunswick and then another campus in Newark. So although I'm part of this big, monstrous Rutgers University, the state university, I also have the benefit of feeling like I'm part of a really small liberal arts college because Rutgers Camden is quite small compared to Rutgers New Brunswick, which is actually my alma mater. So that is where I actually got my PhD from New Brunswick. My position in Rutgers Camden is multifaceted. It is a teaching professor position, which at Rutgers, they have two primary lines. You are a research professor or a teaching professor, and your title will state as such. So I am on the teaching line, and therefore, for recontracting and things like that, I do not have to do any research at all. Um, that doesn't mean I don't do research. I actually do, but some of my colleagues don't, and it's up to us if we choose to, if we choose not to. So it's a very different type of professor line than I think most schools that are the size of Rutgers really offer. Um, which has led me in the path of doing a lot of little side projects with undergrad students, kind of just for fun. So I've gotten my hands dirty with a lot of different things that are not really in my field at all. So my training is in ecology and evolution. I'm a fungal ecologist, so love mushrooms and all things fungi, all the icky stuff that people generally don't like. Kind of like Joe, she likes all the buggy stuff. I like the icky mushroom stuff. Uh, and but I do teach primarily microbiology. That is my main area in which I oversee all of the micro courses at Rutgers Camden, both the nursing and the majors level courses. So I'm the microbiology coordinator. I teach primarily the general microbiology, even though, my hands are in the curriculum for all the micro labs and lectures. And I do a lot of other things. Of course, I teach mycology and I teach a lot of other classes as well, but that is my primary focus at Rutgers Camden. It's microbiology.
Thanks so much for those introductions, y'all. I guess one question to start off and kind of frame some of the rest of the things we want to talk about here when it comes to the practical background will be, is this teaching role that you're in right now the type of role that you wanted to do this whole time? Or was it something that you kind of fell into, or was there any learning moments along the way that taught you that this was something you wanted to do for your career?
Should we just answer, or do we want to go in
Yeah,
order?
we can have the answer here first.
So for me, if you had asked me this my junior or senior year, it would have been, oh, I'm going to do research at like one of those massive Midwestern institutions like Wisconsin or Michigan or something, and I'm going to be an ecology professor. And then reality struck probably only the second year of my PhD. And I started teaching, and I absolutely just loved it. And the more I taught, the more I realized that I loved field work. I'm an ecologist, so who doesn't love going out in the woods, right? Everybody loves that kind of field work. And that was the type of field work I did, so it was great. But I really did not love my lab work, my bench work. I really didn't love when I had to wait 3 months for a piece of equipment to get fixed. It was incredibly frustrating, and I really didn't love the solitude of it. I really loved being in the classroom, and I really loved being able to share really cool stuff, stuff that I thought was just amazing with other people and watching their eyeballs open up. So I actually made that shift pretty early on. And I would say by my third year, I knew that I wanted to teach. I did not want to go into a research path.
Can go. I was probably also around my third or fourth year of my PhD where I had to kind of decide what my career was going to be. And I did really like teaching. I really liked mentoring undergrads, but I wasn't sure was I going to commit fully to teaching or what variation of how much teaching and research. And I always envisioned like kind of a 50-50. But at that point is when I did a certificate in college instruction through my PhD university and really decided to commit to prioritizing some teaching and research together. So yeah, I'd say I was kind of always feeling that I would be on this track and then committed later in my PhD.
Very similar experience for me as well. I taught a lot during my PhD. I taught actually in Australia as an honours student as well and really enjoyed it. And then when I got the opportunity to develop an undergraduate research lab at UT, I was really thrilled about that opportunity. It was great. And I really appreciate working as an educator, but in a big system where we can help a lot of students. And now have taken another part-time, part of my job is training graduate students how to work with undergraduate researchers as well. And so it's been really great. I'm not sure I certainly wouldn't have planned this like in my 20s, but in hindsight, it seems quite a very logical conclusion to my career.
That's cool to hear that there's been a lot of being able to almost like go with the flow in a sense of being able to, during PhD studies, finding the things that you liked about all this research that's going on and really latching onto that and then guiding the career paths after really kind of asking those questions. And that'll be a good way to lead us into the moderator-led discussion portion. These are going to be some questions that are based on attendees' responses and hoping to generate some discussion between our panelists. And I might ask like this general question, prompt a specific panelist, but I encourage folks to riff off each other's responses and even ask your own follow-ups if you'd like. And then for folks in the audience, if there's anything that the panelists bring up that you'd like to learn more about, drop it in the chat, and we'll do our best to address these questions either during the conversation or the time dedicated to the audience questions later. So a lot of our questions that we got are very pragmatic and very like, how did you do this? Or what are these practical components that you did when you were pursuing your career here? And like I said, there was some stuff it seems like folks were discovering about halfway through their PhD career. And I know, Andrea, you mentioned a couple things in particular with a teaching certificate and a potential postdoc program. And for other folks too, was there any like really practical components that once you kind of decided what you wanted to do were really helpful in your experience looking for the career that you have now? Andrea, do you want to start with you?
Yeah, so I started TAing in my third year. I had a like a fellowship before that that allowed me to just do research. And when I started, I mean, I really enjoyed that process. So I would say definitely, I know some TAing is usually required of most programs, but the more you can do it, I think you're going to explore if you enjoy that or not. And there are tons of resources out there now to learn about teaching. And I would say look for papers about the scholarship of teaching and learning. It's called SOTL, SOTL. And that will really, it opened my eyes when I started to see this about there is research in how to teach and teach in effective ways and how to evaluate teaching that I had no idea about from just doing my research. And if you're interested in this kind of thing, I think that's a good place to start. ASM has the Conference for Undergraduate Educators, and they have tons of resources. SABR is the Society for Biology Education Researchers, I think. It's SABR. So, yeah, there's a ton out there. Unfortunately, the postdoc I did is no longer funded by the NIH, but if you can do some teaching in your postdoc, that is also incredibly helpful, especially if you can be the instructor of record, where you are in control of the whole class and get teaching evaluations. Those are some of the things that are looked for in the hiring process.
Really great. Were those things that you knew going in, or is this coming from some of the literature that you're reading, or did it have to be something you figured out yourself?
Well, definitely my postdoc taught me a lot of
Gotcha.
this. And when I was
Yeah.
doing my certificate program is when I started to learn about sodal research. But
Hmm.
having the opportunity to go to conferences in teaching happened during my postdoc. So,
Gotcha. Yeah.
And most institutions now are recognizing the need to have more official teacher training in higher ed,
Hmm.
whereas we didn't have that. I don't know how long when everybody else got their PhD in here, but 15, 20, 25 years ago, there really wasn't this push to train higher ed professors to teach, right? So it was more or less, we're going to throw you to the wolves. Go in there and figure it out, which is how I learned to teach. And then I started to see all of these new opportunities at different schools being offered. Like, oh, look, there's actually a class that teaches me how to teach. And oh, look, I can go and do this year-long program. Like ACU has a great year-long program in teaching excellence. So a lot of universities now have centers for teaching excellence. So if you're at an institution that offers classes like that, even if they're self-guided Canvas classes, I would highly recommend taking them just for your own growth, but also those certificates don't hurt to put on your CV either.
I was going to say the exact same thing. Excellent point. Additionally, if you're in a position as a TA or a postdoc to reach out to these centers for teaching and learning, or even faculty, if you have that available, to have your teaching evaluated, to have observers come to your class and then get feedback. Um, if they don't have specialized programs, I'm sure you can find survey responses. Surveys that an evaluator can fill out for you, and you can talk about your objectives in teaching, and then follow up with what you've accomplished and how you could grow from that experience. That's really helpful. Um, University of Illinois had a big program like that, and that was fantastic. The other one thing, if you're a PhD student, I started my PhD older. I was 31, so there was quite an age gap between me and the undergraduates. So, which is nice, I wasn't a near peer, but I was able to work with the professors to develop the curriculum a bit. I think it gave me a bit more authority. But if you do have a professor that you TA for multiple years, perhaps you can work on some of the assessments, if that's possible, go over exams before they're administered to the students. Grading, obviously, there's grading, but also working on the bones of the class if you're in a position to do so. That would really help develop your skills.
That's really great to hear. There's apparently a lot of universities are going to have these certificate programs or excellence programs under all these different banners, it sounds like, and encouraging folks to probably do some little Google searching for those programs, whether they be online or officially in course would be a really great idea, as well as all these fun acronyms that happen in academia of the SOTL, SOTL, the ASM Conference for Education, SABRE. Those are going to be some things to be looking out for, just for a little bit of a recap. So then when we have this building of resources while you're in this training phase, when it came to actually finding a job, which is the fun part at the end of the day, would you be able to speak to a little bit of your experience about how you found a job? Where did you find these listings? And if you're willing, talk about some of that experience of how long it took and the efforts that you found to be maybe most fruitful in your times looking for an actual position. Jennifer, can we start with you?
Sure. So my experience was actually pretty painless. And I don't mean to invoke any sort of jealousy right now. I know things are not painless right now. And I know people because I mentor even postdocs in an Iracta program right now, and they are really struggling to find jobs. It's really even with one postdoc, a teaching focused postdoc, they're struggling. So it is tough out there right now. I know that. So I don't want to diminish how hard it is by telling you how easy it was for me. It was very easy for me. I had because I'm at Rutgers, my PhD was at Rutgers, New Brunswick, but I actually used the chemistry lab in Camden to process some of my samples. So I knew the Camden faculty, and I had started teaching as an adjunct there during my PhD to make some extra money. So I already had a little bit of an in with the faculty in the biology department at Rutgers Camden. They knew me. And so when were doing a search, I applied. And I really think having known them and been teaching there for a couple years, their students knew me. I had quite good teaching evaluations from their students. It wasn't that I'm not that surprised that I was offered the position at the time. It just seemed like a natural progression in my career. It actually never crossed my mind that I wouldn't get that position, to be honest with you. It just seemed like a very natural fit. So I was really blessed, and it was timing too. The line happened to
Mhm.
open up the same year I was completing my PhD. So I mean that's just luck. It had nothing to do with me being a better applicant. I was lucky. If they didn't have that
Mhm.
line, I would have gone elsewhere. It was really timing as well.
I want to echo that statement. The timing is something that, you're just up against a different thing every year, and you may be the perfect applicant in a different year. And it just depends who needs positions. I was on the job market in 2022. So I went in preparing that whole summer knowing, okay, I got to get my statements together. I was working in my cohort of other postdocs. And what was crazy is that we were competing against each other. Like we were all microbiologists, and there's only maybe 12 positions. We all wanted to go to small schools. So we were very transparent to each other about, are you applying to that one? I'm applying to this one. Like, we'll see what happens. And we helped each other, which was nice to feel like even though we were competing, we were had all of our best interests in mind. So that process, I would say, start early and get as many eyes as you can to read your statements. There's going to be a teaching statement and a research statement, depending on the school you applied to. But the teaching statement, it's really important to have stories you can talk about. You have to talk about a philosophy of how you approach teaching, but you need concrete examples of how you demonstrate that philosophy, which you're only really going to get from being in the classroom. So the more chances you can innovate, like Joe was mentioning, like working on an assessment, those are great stories to tell in that statement. If you're fortunate to get the interviews, especially like an in-person interview, you'll have to do a teaching demonstration. So again, it's great to have people that you can do that with and practice. It'll look different in different schools. So that might be like a 45-minute class, and they might give you a topic. If you're in genetics, teach about gene regulation, which is what I had to do. So definitely practice those things, have activities in mind that you're going to do. Um, it was hard because schools have different deadlines. And for smaller schools, the applications will open up kind of in August. Those are some of the earliest ones I've seen. They will close in September or October. New ones will open in October. They'll be due in November. New ones can come up constantly. So you have to keep balancing, if you get an offer, do you say yes if it's the right, like maybe it's not the perfect fit, but are you going to get another offer? And I was balancing five offers that kind of came consecutively at different times, and I had to say no to things that I didn't know what was going to come next. And that was the hardest part of that process. So the school I'm in now was actually the last offer I got. And if I didn't get it, I was like, it's got to be. I was very fortunate. I will say that. I did not expect to get five offers. That was not not what I was planning. I was like, oh, maybe I'll get one. But it's all about the timing. And those other people I applied with got offers at the same schools that I did. So I will say that I think the IRACTA programs or these kind of teaching postdocs really are like the top tier of what you can do to prepare yourself. Because I don't think it's by mistake that we all ended up with offers and positions, fortunately.
I feel like I'm not the best person to give advice on this, but also for me, it was about timing. I started in 2015 at UT as with a teaching postdoc, and it was at a time when the program I worked for, the Freshman Research Initiative, had a really big grant from HHMI. It was $5 million to develop this program for freshman undergraduate research, and they were adding new professors. And so we got a few months to develop the lab that I was working uh, that that to develop the lab that we currently have and the topics. And then after 6 months, I was invited to apply for a position as faculty, which was awarded. So again, it was serendipitous. It was because there was money and it was expanding. But all the teaching had helped before, and having artifacts, examples of your teaching, as Andrea said, and philosophies, teaching philosophy, teaching statement, examples of success, and narrative of how things have, how you changed over time. You might try something, it didn't work, how you fixed it. They're not looking for perfection, they're looking for growth over time. But having all those ready to go will be really helpful.
Wow, there's a lot to dig into here with a lot of what we're hearing of. It sounds like timing and luck is a part of it for sure, but I'm sure that like in some ways, if we look back, then there's going to be a lot of moments where it feels like luck, but there's also a lot of preparation that went into that at some point by setting ourselves up, whether it be through having all these like specificities in our narrative is a big part that I'm hearing, and be able to point to direct things. And so while we're looking for jobs, kind of shape our own narrative to ourselves and bounce that off other people that we have available too, which is where it sounds like the networking side of stuff is coming in. If yeah, if we whether it's when we're doing our research and we know people in different institutions to reach out to and have that be an open thing, or peers that you have at the moment, be able to network with them in a way that will hopefully kind of iron sharpens iron, and get a better resource both for yourself and helping other folks. Andrea, you were looking for specific jobs. How did you find was there a website or a forum that you found all these jobs posting to, or was it just Googling liberal arts institutions jobs near me?
Yeah, so the main one I looked on was higher ed jobs. So there's a few of these that you can sign up for newsletters. If you put in what you're looking for, they'll send you every week, and it can get very overwhelming quickly. Here are all the jobs that have been posted. There's also the Eco Evo job board, which is a Google Doc, and I can post the link to the most recent one because each year they put a new one out. And I don't entirely know who runs it, but it's all anonymous, and people will post the jobs and people will leave comments like, "Oh, I applied. Have you heard anything yet?" Which is great because it's such a mystery when you send out all these things and you're like, "I have no idea where they're at in the process." And if you at least hear like, "Oh, people are starting to get phone interviews," which is the first step, if you didn't get any in a certain time, you weren't picked at that point, and you can try to navigate through things a little bit. Um, yeah, those were my main ones.
Giving flashbacks to applying for grad school. Thanks, Elle. That's really helpful for finding our jobs about like how we get there in this pragmatic side of stuff. If we then like turn to the present and learning about more of the positions that we're in right now. So I think in academia, there's a lot of folks at research-based institutions where a lot of us are coming from for PhDs or training. And at that point, success of a PI is often determined by research output or securing grants. And I'm wondering how that has changed or how it compares to the roles that you're in right now. Um, I guess from both a personal standpoint of how you deem success, but then also from a institutional standpoint, how they track success and how you find success there. Could you do some comparing and contrasting of how that is measured in your position here? Maybe you're tenure tracked and you have these goals you have to meet, or are there other metrics that are used? Joe, would you be able to speak to this here?
So I'm a professional track at University of Texas, and we get evaluated on three things: teaching, research, and service. But we go up on two things. Um, so when we go up for promotion, right, that's how we're evaluated, but primarily teaching. And so the measures of success there are how many classes you've taught. They say evaluations aren't important, but they are. They do want to go through the comments and they want to see that your students feel supported and they like you and they also are learning. And then student success as well is evaluated, and also professional observations and evaluations, and your measures of success and your documents are important, your teaching statement. And like I said, it has to show narrative. So if there are some negative comments in some of your feedback, you need to address them and show change over a couple of years. Um, so that's to go up for promotion. And then on top of that, there's service as well and research. From my position, I don't have to bring in funding, but it certainly helps. And the University of Texas has some large grants. And then I'm also associated with uh, a tenured professor. So there's grants that come through that as well. But as a professor of practice, I'm supposed to be practicing what I'm teaching, which is teaching undergraduates how to do research. So they also want to see publications as well, from myself and my students together. And that it's not the same as a tenured professor who's at an R1 institution. It's quite modest, but they do want to see 2 or 3 publications over, 5 years, ideally. And they also want to see students going off in research as well and staying there. And then on top of that, service. So whatever that looks like at your university.
I can go to, so the ratio I mentioned, the 60-30-10, is how they say that we're evaluated, even if that time isn't what it looks like in the end. What you might find, and I didn't know at all, even in my postdoc, is what that 10% looks like on the surface. And this will vary from institution to institution, but at my institution, we are on committees and we have shared faculty governance, which means that the administration and faculty members are on committees together to do things like evaluate the curriculum, decide which department is going to get somebody, we call it allocation of a new position. So if we can hire 3 people, which department's going to get a position to hire? All these things that run the university that you would never think about. And it ends up taking more time than you might anticipate. And maybe others can speak to the administrative things. But in terms of scholarly output, we don't have a hard and fast number, but we are expected again to have like about, 2 to 3 publications. I also am not required to have any grants. Although people here do have grants, so we've had people that got NSF and NASA grants and other small things. The teaching, we do peer observations. So you'll have someone who is tenured come in and do the evaluation that Joe was mentioning, where you have a discussion beforehand of the things you would like them to comment on, and then you'll have a briefing afterwards, and they'll attend your class. But the narrative that she was speaking of is the same for me as well. So you have to be able to talk about what you are changing each time. So be very reflective in your teaching.
So my role is, it sounds like slightly different. We are not expected to publish at all. So there is no publishing associated with my position on paper. Um, just like I don't have to go and give talks to the community, and I don't have to participate in the Eracta program as a teaching mentor. I don't have to do any of that, but I do it. So you often find yourself in that position in higher ed, not especially when you love it. You're doing these things not necessarily because you have to, but because you want to, right? And it's really nice when you get to, I'm mid-career, so you get to mid-career and you're well established in your department. You know that you're not going anywhere. I'm not tenured. Rutgers is interesting in how they assign title with tenure. So all of our research professors, so assistant research professor, associate research professor, they are all tenure-track. So they eventually will get tenure after 6 years. And if they don't get tenure after 6 years, they essentially lose their job. And in our department, we've actually lost 2 people in the last 4 or 5 years who did not accomplish tenure. So after 6 years with us, they had to leave. I have been in my current position with Rutgers for 14, 14 years, 13 years. And I am non-tenure track, as all teaching professors are. So there are no teaching professors that get tenure at Rutgers. You just don't. But we also have an incredibly strong union, and I have something that's called presumptive renewal, which means during recontracting, my contracts are every 5 years. That's the minimum that they can give me. And I am presumptively renewed. So when I go up for renewal again, the assumption is I get my job. I don't have to jump through a ton of hoops anymore or anything like that. You do that for the first 5 contracts. But once you're beyond 5 contracts, then you are presumptively renewable. And that's where I'm at in my career with Rutgers. So earlier on, your contracts are only, I think, a minimum of 2 years, and then they'll move you to 3, and then you stay at 3 until you hit 5 total contract renewals, and then you go to presumptive renewability. So it's really the closest you can get to tenure in a non-tenure track position, because you're pretty much guaranteed you're going to keep your job unless you do something really egregious. Um, so it's a little bit different. And my job on paper is supposed to be about a 90-10 teaching service split. It is not. Mine is more like a 65-35. I do a ton of service. I have a ton of administrative responsibilities. I'm our department's pre-med coordinator. I'm actually for the ERACTA that we are part of. We have funding for a couple more years until the new mechanism from NIH is released. So I am our campus coordinator. I was a mentor for years. Now I'm actually the coordinator at the administrative level for that program. And then I'm on, like 4 department committees. I'm a university senator, which is university-wide. So I do a ton of other administrative stuff at all different levels, whether it's department, campus, or full Rutgers University. So there's really a big, wide breadth. But the one thing I don't have to do, I don't have to publish. And I don't have to bring in any external money at all. There's no requirement there. But, the trade-off is I don't get official tenure, right?
So a big thing that I am hearing is that administration and service takes up a lot more time than we originally anticipated when
Yep.
getting these jobs, which I feel like is maybe what a lot of academia is like at the end of the day. But then a big part of this too is the feedback and connecting with students and having being able to establish those connections. And I'm wondering as we move towards maybe a little bit more of kind of like philosophical or way we like outlook on things, what are ways that you like to connect to students? What are the things that encourage you about teaching, or what do you like to see in students? And I mean, that could be great in and of itself, but how does that then connect to this idea of a feedback or improving those teaching experiences?
So I like to tell my students on the first day, when we're just talking about the class, I like to tell them that their professors are human, right? They all like to look at us and they're all terrified, right? So if I have a student say to me, "Oh my gosh, Oberle, she's terrifying," I kind of chuckle at that because I'm probably the least terrifying person in my department. Um, so I like to tell them that we're all human, and that I'm on their side. Like I'm here to help them succeed. I'm not here because I want to give them a bad grade. That's not my goal is not that, right? My goal is to support their learning and help them to actually accomplish that in the classroom, and that I'm their partner, I'm not their adversary. And I think putting that out on the very first day, well, you can even watch their expressions kind of soften. So I'm one of those people who did not do well teaching online. I need that feedback in person, and I watch for eye movement, facial expressions, all of that. And that thing, I've been saying that to them for about 5 years now, and it works. And it does soften them. And I always press on them, come to office hours, even if you have no question, just sit down and talk to me. I'm a talker. I'll tell you all about my kid. I'll talk to you about my dogs. We'll just talk. And they eventually open up, and then you end up building a relationship with me over the next 2 3 4 years, and there's your letter of recommendation for grad school. you know so that's what I tell students on the first day, and then they feel like they have a partner, and they have a partner over the next so many years of their undergrad.
Yeah, I can relate to that last part that I see my students a lot because I am pretty much the only microbiologist in this position teaching these upper level courses. So I teach medical microbiology, bacterial physiology, molecular genetics, like these are classes that all the micro majors have to take. So we're together at least 3 years, and I get to watch them grow, which is so exciting to see, from when we first start out together to the end and when they graduate. Like I'm so proud of them and all that they accomplish. And I like to put a lot of authentic research into my labs to give them opportunities, even if they can't, like, it's so competitive to get into these summer research programs at big universities. So it gives them something to talk about in those essays. And I get to write good letters to them too if I can see, how they've thought through critical thinking and experimental design.
So the program I work for is a bit unique. I teach half of my position is teaching this FRI course, which is 35 students. I get 35 students in spring, and then they return in fall. And then we also pay those students to stay on to help teach the other students. So it's kind of like Montessori, right? So the students are learning the skills and then they're applying them to do research, but then they're teaching them as well. So I get to know my students very well, and I can really individualize the way I work with the students. Um, I get to know them all. I have stories about them all, and they're easy letters to write. But even if they just stay for FRI, it's still 2 semesters, and having that extended period of time with your students is very important for them. And it's very important to go from just teaching, but also to mentoring as well. And then in some instances, the students move on and then they reach back out to you, and that is the best thing. It's fantastic. And two of my students actually do bee microbiome research. And it's one of the highlights of my life, I think, that having these relationships that you can nurture through their undergraduate degree, and then also the additional seeing them go off into the world and succeed, that's the thing that gets me up out of the every day and out. And one thing I did want to say is having a specialized undergraduate research space and the opportunity to provide supports for the students is really helpful in helping them develop some self-efficacy and some coping skills in a scaffolded environment. So that's kind of the jargonistic way of saying, what we all do, and giving that helps them build an identity. And so creating those environments and connections with professors can help them create identities that are going to help them succeed overall. And so that's a great part of what I do. And I'm sure a lot of, teaching focused professors are doing the exact same thing in different circumstances.
I really love hearing about everyone's desire and passion to connect with folks, and hearing back from students is always going to be an incredible thing to have. I'm curious if there are any institutions or things at the place that you work at, or ways that the school itself helps mediate these personal connections with students, or these extended office hours and these conversations. Is that something that sometimes has a top-down perspective, or is that something that you have purely had to bring to the table, and a self-motivation for those connections and that type of interaction?
Well, I can start. Our school is 1,500 students. So I think it just inevitably lends itself to like your students know you, you know them. And we have something called the Connection Experience, which is our signature program, where every student has to do something that is practical. Like for our science students, it's doing research or going out to internships, etc. So it's really built in for us. And what's amazing about Ohio Wesleyan is that they have the money to support that. So even though we're a small school, we have endowments that will pay students. They can apply for small grants. I mean, up to like $10,000, which is not small at our institution. So it's amazing how much they actually really do support students to do their own research and develop their own projects.
Yeah, Rutgers Camden has a lot of internal grant opportunities for students, not just for research, but for any form of experiential learning. So our chancellor has an experiential learning grant. And actually, it's available. There's a $3,000 grant available to all students one time. And they can use that for a study abroad course. They can use it for to help fund research as long as it's experiential. And really, all they have to do is apply. So I mean, that's fantastic. And $3,000 again, I mean, you hear that, you're like, oh, well, so-and-so got a grant for 500,000. And, but again, for an undergraduate student who wants to develop a research project, that's actually quite a bit of money. And it's usually enough if they don't want to do research, but they do want to go do field work. We have quite a few independent study classes that are in other countries that also incorporate ecology and field work, things like that. They can do that. And a lot of times it's almost enough to cover the whole trip. Sometimes actually I'm doing one of these trips in the fall semester to Belize, and I budgeted it just to come under 3,000. So that grant will cover the full class for any student that wants to enroll. So, and there are other opportunities as well. But that's really the big one. And that's the one where it's really not competitive. You just have to ask. And you have to know about it. That's the key, helping your students to know about these things because they're not advertised.
So UT's the other end of the scale. We have in the College of Natural Sciences 11,000 undergraduates. The incoming each year, it's around 2,500 students. So it's huge. And we have a really big college undergraduate education unit. It's very big compared to the graduate college, which is very tiny. And so the Freshman Research Initiative brings in about 40% of those students. And then the Office of Experiential Learning tries to fill in the gaps to provide opportunities for all those other students, which includes mixes. They've done mixes in the past to connect students with faculty to some extent, but a lot of trainings as well. How to get your foot in the door with research, how to, write applications and things like that. They have undergraduate research conferences, so they offer a lot. So the university is really provides a lot of support for undergraduates because it's so big, right? And so that's the benefit there.
Yeah, so it sounds like for especially at these smaller institutions, if we're looking for this kind of job and we value this type of training and experience, looking for these internal grant opportunities and that type of funding and that dedicated funding for those and that experience with students sounds like a good thing to be looking out for. We have just a little bit of time left, and there's a question from some folks in the audience that I think could be a good little wrap up here. What are three or a few key words or principles that you would like to emphasize if you're going to be rewriting your whole teaching philosophy? Like, what is a core component of your teaching philosophy in a couple words, or maybe a short statement, whichever kind of articulates what you're hoping to do in your work?
Well, my three words would be innovation, partnership, and empowerment.
I don't know if I can sum up in three words, but what I really believe in is something that Joe mentioned is building the scientific identity and overcoming this imposter syndrome that so many of them have, that they come in and they don't either they think they can't do research, they can't do science, they can't do math, and finding their place in science.
Uh, my main theme would be individualization, so getting the chance to get to know students, and then support structures. But students need to be confident to access support structures, so self-efficacy as well.
Awesome. Love to hear that. Real briefly, if there's any questions from the audience that folks want to ask, you can drop it in the chat. We can give just a little bit of time here for those to be written in the chat. Keep an eye on that. Or if there's other questions from other panelists that they'd like to ask each other.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
Joe, this whole institute that you've been describing, does this exist at any other universities, or is this something unique that UT Austin's created?
Thank you for asking. Yes, it does. So HHMI gave UT $5 million to build out the Freshman Research Initiative and then to have other replication sites copy this program. I think essentially it's a liberal arts college in a big institution. And so it's at SUNY Binghamton and Maryland have freshman research initiative programs. UT El Paso, also San Antonio have them as well. And then other colleges, uh, Bloomington, Indiana as well, and Minnesota, I think. And they all do it in different ways. There was one university that had a second year experience because first year students were often underrepresented minorities, and they just want to help them get settled in the university away from home and to get rid of some of that imposter syndrome. And they said it's too soon to start to have students jump straight into research. So we give them the first year, but we have a second year research program. And so it has been copied and emulated. I will say one regret I have of my career is that I didn't know the scholarship of teaching or how to evaluate the impact of my teaching in a scholarly way. And so if that's something you're interested in, that's something to consider learning about or collaborating with people, and then you can actually measure your impact. Thanks for asking that question. I was looking through the comments.
We love to quantify stuff. Got to measure stuff in science. Well, thanks so much, everyone, both the audience for our panelists today, for giving some feedback and talking about your experiences and sharing with us here. So for our next panel upcoming, it will be sometime in March. It's going to be about microbiome science communication, both from a academic, outreach, and industry setting. Looking forward to that here coming up. Look for advertisements from us here in the near future. If you'd like to leave feedback or suggest upcoming topics, we have this QR code here on the screen, and as well as some links in the chat that you can follow there. And then on the next slide, if you are interested on joining this early career working group committee, you can follow this link here as well, where you can then look into opportunities to form these panels, give your ideas and insight, and drive where this is all going. So with that, one last thank you to all the folks here who joined our panel today, and we'll see you in here a little bit. Take care, everyone.